Tier lists in fighting games don't matter. Well, kind of. Tier lists definitely have a purpose, but I feel many people don't understand what that purpose is, and those people who don't understand it end up using tier lists for the wrong reasons. If you somehow don't know what a tier list is for a fighting game is a chart that judges each character's viability in competitive play. Usually, a tier list is made to show how good a character's general matchups are, with characters with more good matchups than bad trending to the top of a tier list, while characters with more bad matchups than good trending to the bottom. Now, all this is true about tier lists, but there are several things that I feel cause people to misunderstand them, starting with perception is defined as a way of regarding, understanding, or interpreting something, and in most cases the way we perceive things are defined by professionals, like how students would trust a physics professor teaching them how momentum conservation works. So when it comes to a tier list for a fighting game, most people would immediately gravitate towards pro players, who better understand how the game works. In most cases, players treat these tier lists as if it's their fighting game bible, but I want to throw out the question, should we do this?
Wait, hold on, Name Taken. Do you mean to say that we shouldn't look to pro players for tier lists? Are you saying that they're wrong?
Well, no, I wouldn't say you should not look toward the tier list of pro players, and in a lot of cases, tier lists themselves are in part subjective, so I can't say they're wrong. However, what I meant by that question is that by fully devoting yourself to your favorite pro player's tier list, it shapes the way you think about the game drastically. Because of them, a lot of people buy into the idea that one character is greater than another just because their placement is higher than others. This is problematic because in most cases, unless there's a video accompanying the tier list, there will often be no explanation on why these characters are placed in these ways. This can cause the average player to look at a tier list and immediately disregard characters on the lower side of a tier list because they feel they're unviable. Or maybe they would complain about a top tier but don't understand what makes them a top tier in the first place. My favorite example for a case of people complaining about a top tier character is in Tekken 7 with Akuma. Akuma is known to have some of the best damage, tools, and punishment in the game, with many pro players in the past complaining about how strong he is. But what goes over so many of the average players' head is that Akuma is also the most execution heavy character in the game, and while he can be extremely powerful, the skill required to reach that level can only be brought out by the top 5% of the Tekken 7 player base. In fact, without the necessary execution, the traits that make him a top tier are simply non-existent, with his simpler combos and punishment being fairly subpar. So if the way people perceive a tier list's purpose, as the order of the strongest to weakest characters, is wrong, then what is a tier list's purpose? A tier list's purpose is not to show who are the strongest characters in the game, but instead show who has the most potential at the highest level of play. You might ask, what's the difference between strength and potential? And I'm glad that you did, because strength and potential are extremely similar, yet are so different. For one, when you say a character is stronger than another character, you inherently say they have an advantage, which in a lot of cases is just not true. However, when you say a character has greater potential than another, it means that they have the possibility to perform better on average, but not always. This is because player skill is a huge factor, and a player's skill level isn't linear. For example, it's possible for one player to have amazing execution while still having very poor game sense, while another player might be the opposite, having weak execution but knowing when to press their attack or to block or punish in general. In a little thought experiment here, if you were to get two brand new players to try Tekken 7, and one player plays Katarina and the other player plays Geese, I would bet my money that the Katarina player would find a greater amount of success when starting out, because while the character may have less potential than Geese, she is easier to play and understand. I feel many people don't understand this about tier lists, that a tier list placement is based off the highest level of play, and most players aren't anywhere near that level. So by fully devoting yourself to a tier list, you are doing yourself a disservice, because in the end, tier lists are not applicable to a large portion of a fighting game community, and using tier placements to complain or boast about a character are often in the end meaningless. That's because tier lists are rarely ever indicative of an average player's experience. So now you might ask, does that mean that I think tier lists are not important? Well, even after all that, I would say no, tier lists are definitely important, but for other reasons. Like I said before, tier lists show the greatest amount of potential a character has at the highest level. This allows us normal players to look at a top level player's mindset and opinions on all the characters, and allows us to discuss and delve deep into why those characters are in these positions. Through a tier list, we as a community can figure out what each character offers or lacks. And in the end, that's why I think tier lists in fighting games don't matter. Kind of.